Hey, what's up and how's it going? My name is Toby, and in today's video we are going to do placement, physics and changing textures on the go, all within live AR meshing. So let's get going. And I've here set up Unity scene with the ARDK 3 installed, as well as the shared AR and ARDK samples package installed. If you want to know how to set up Unity for augmented reality, check my prior videos. I'll put some information in the video description so you guys can just set up your Unity and get started and follow along. So we're going to begin by creating a new scene, and we're gonna call this AR meshing, placement, whatever, and just open that up. So then we are going to delete our main camera, right click XR, and then create a new AR session as well as a XR origin. Alright, so next up, let's just quickly set up meshing. And we're going to create a new empty object in our XR origin, call this meshing. And then we're just gonna attach the AR mesh manager as well as the Lightship meshing extension, like that, and just quickly set some values. So concurrent QSAs, we're gonna say 100, frame rate maybe 20, integration distance, let's say 4. We don't, as we're indoor currently, so we're testing this indoors. We will only need that. If you of course want to test outdoors, would be more something like 10. Voxel size, it's fine like that, and mesh blocking size, let's set this to 1. So next up, we of course need a mesh prefab. I've already done this here, but let's just, for practice reasons, create a new one. Just call this a mesh prefab, and just add a mesh renderer, then a mesh filter, like this, and of course a mesh collider, like that. So then let's also add some kind of material. So I have created just this sample material, right click new material, and then we can prefab this, for example, under our asset folder. Just drag mesh prefab in here, and then delete it from our scene and add it to our meshing object right here. So now we need to make sure that, as we have installed Lightship, in our settings, of course, we have the API key, but we have also in playback, have playback enabled, and then we choose in our dataset path one video, pretty much one template that we can use to debug and test our app in the editor. And if you take a look in the video description, I provide a set of sample scenes that you can use and download and use in your editor in order to test out these AR apps. They are being created with the recording sample scene, which you can find in the ARDK samples. But for now, I just went ahead to my samples here and just selected one of those. All right, so the desk horizontal is the one that I'm using, which is also, of course, downloadable. So if we now hit play and take a look, then we should see that meshing is working. So let's take a look. Yep, seems to work fine. I just see that there are still shadows basically casted by the mesh, and usually we don't want that, so we can click on the mesh prefab and then just cast shadows off. Alright, so next up, let's get into placement, and for that we're going to need a few scripts, and also in the video description, you guys know it, in the video description there's a lot of action going on. You will find a few scripts that we are going to use now in order to get placement going. You might ask yourself, hey, why do you need actually scripts? Why can't we just go ahead, like in the AR placement on plane detection in one of the prior tutorials? Why can't we just go ahead and take our AR raycasting manager? And this is because AR planes are different to AR created mesh and geometry. This is the first reason, and the second reason is, of course, that we also can't place our objects on other objects. As you saw in the preview, we also place cubes onto each other. And so we will need to write a little custom script here, but it's not a problem. I'm going to provide you with the script, and I'm also going to tell you step by step how it was created. So let's go to our XR origin, create a new empty and call this AR placement. And then just click add component, and or maybe it's easier to just go here into your asset folder. It's the placement on mesh script. And it will need the camera in the camera offset, and it will also need a placement object. So let's quickly create that. Create a new 3D object, call it placement cube, like that. And then decrease the scale to 0.1. And we're going to take, instead of the default material, maybe let's take some green. I think this one is actually from the ARDK samples, so we can all use it. And then we still need to make sure that we can correctly place the object. Oh, I also just reset the scale, not too great. So let's create another empty object and call this cube parent. So what we want to do is we want to have pretty much the gizmo that controls our cube, pretty much the origin, if you want to say so. We want to have that on the ground, because otherwise the cube is going to be placed like this, halfway inside the ground, and this is not so great. I'm going to show you in a second what I mean. So let's just reset this null object and just set the position of this placement cube up by half of its scale. So this is 0.05. like this. So now the cube placement object is pretty much here at the bottom surface and in the middle. And then we can just drag the placement cube in the cube parent. Just again go to our assets, just drag that in as a prefab, and then just delete the cube here. Alright, so next up we want to go into our AR placement and drag the cube parent into the script and take a look at what happens if we click play. Ah, by the way, we forgot something. If we would click play now, we would get an error message. And this is because we don't have an event system here. So let's just quickly create a new empty object, call this event system. And then add a component, call this event system, and add default input modules, replace with the UI input. So this is pretty much needed to just register that we are actually clicking somewhere, right? All right, so then let's save and click play. And now if we're in our scene and click somewhere, yep, we see that things are going quite well. We don't have physics yet, but we can place objects onto each other. So just as a very quick example, if we would drag in not our cube parent, but actually our cube. Let's just also prefab this. So if we have this here in our placement objects, we are going to see that it's actually somewhere half inside the ground. And also, if we want to place it on top of another object, it will always be, 50% just inside the other object, which is not really ideal. Okay, so how does this placement script work? Let's take a look. And if we're going to go through this, we of course have the reference to our camera and the object that we want to place. We also have a list with all the objects that have been instantiated yet, all the cubes, because if we want to do something to them later on, then this is the easiest way to just manage these 3D objects, right? So then in our update method, we will first of all differentiate if we are actually in the Unity editor, so on the computer, or if we are on device, because then the input methods that we want to check for are different, right? On the PC, we want to check for the mouse button, and then we also want to check whether, our mouse button is over a UI object, because if we add buttons and then we click on the button, if we don't check this one, we will do whatever the button wants, for example, toggle between two materials, but still place a cube behind it. So it will not just block this raycast, this kind of click that we are going to use to trigger whatever we want. And so then in the Unity iOS section here, or Android, We are also going to check for the touch, so only for one touch, not for a multi-touch gesture. That's why the touch count should be at 1. And then of course also if we just start clicking on the screen and we don't want to check for if the touch actually holds on the screen or is being removed, we just want to have this initial click. Well, then we also want to check, are we over the UI? So this is what we are going to do with the pointer event data. So we're going to use the event system in order to check out whether whether our click was above a UI object, and if that was the case, we don't want to, go further and instantiate anything. If that was not the case, we are also going to call the touch array method, which is just going to pretty much take the touch position, kind of like pointing on a window glass shield, and then pointing on an object, right? So we're going to take this position, we're going to shoot a laser beam onto our geometry, and if we find something, then we want to instantiate the object at the point, and we also want to find out what's the rotation of this point, so that if we point it on the wall, then our object is not going to look straight up, but rather it's going to be 90 degrees pointing towards us. So this is what this script is going to do. But we still need to activate physics, right? So how are we going to do that? We're going to go first of all to our mesh prefab, and we're going to add a rigid body here. We're gonna uncheck use gravity and check is kinematic, because we don't want our mesh to fall down. So then we're gonna go into our AR placement on the cube parent. We're gonna select the placement cube, which also already has a collider attached. And then we're also taking a rigid body and add it to this object. But in this case, we want to use gravity, and we also don't want it to be static, so we want it to move around and actually be affected by physics. So now if we're just gonna hit play. So if we add now our cube by clicking and add another one and another one, you can see that we have this very nice physics effect where it's pretty much interacting with the real world. But now the question is, well, how are we gonna, well, on the one hand, remove this material and replace it with an invisible material that will only cast shadows, but also if we want to test on device, how can we kind of toggle in between these materials in order to check whether our meshing is actually working correctly? So we're going to do this by adding 2 new scripts to the scene. They are in the video description. So as always, a lot going on in the video description. So we need to, first of all, go to our mesh prefab, and then there's this little handy script that's called change self material, which is pretty much going to do what it says. It's going to change the material of the object that it's attached to. So now we can create 2 slots here, and the first one will be our sample material, and the second one is going to be our invisible material. This is being installed with the ARDK samples. So if you haven't installed this yet, make sure to have it. And in order to avoid any error messages, not only install the normal ARDK 3, but also the shared AR plugin. That's pretty much the only reason we will not need it for anything else in this tutorial. So then let's go back, and on the AR meshing game object here, let's add the second script, which is change prefab material. And for that, we're going to do the same thing, just open 2 slots. The first one with the sample material, and the second one with our invisible mesh with shadows. So then, of course, we need to add our prefab here. So our mesh prefab, just drag that in here. So let's make sure it's the same one. And now there's the question on how to toggle it, because if we're gonna take a look at these scripts in our IDE, we can see they're pretty simple. They take exactly the prefab and the materials, and then when there's a certain event triggered, they say, okay, now we wanna toggle the materials. So if that event is being triggered, then we wanna loop through our current materials, make sure it's not longer than, by using the mod operator, not longer than the actual material array length, and then just set our shared material to the one that's currently at that position. And it's pretty much exactly the same So you might ask, why do we need two scripts? So the first one is for every mesh object that has already been instantiated. And the second one is for all the mesh objects that are going to be instantiated from the point we will toggle this. Because otherwise we would just change all the existing meshes and all the new ones would still have the old material, right? Okay, so the question is now, how do we actually toggle this? So for that, we can create a new Text Mesh Pro button. And if you haven't installed this yet, there might be a little pop-up to install it, and you should just go ahead and do that. Make sure that the button is on the top left corner. So click on Windows or on Alt and just left bottom corner. So then change the position a little bit so it's somewhat not so close to the corner. Also maybe increase the height. Let's just call this toggle like that. And then we will go to the button and we're gonna add a script that is also in the video description. And this is event on click. And then what we need to do is just add on click action, drag the same button prefab, so the game object, into this field here and select event on click. And then we want to say invoke button toggle. So what the script is going to do is pretty simple. It's just going to invoke an event, and so then it will pretty much scream out, and anyone who's interested that the button was toggled, which are these two scripts here, so they listen to this event pretty much. And if event on click says, hey guys, you know, the button got clicked, then they can do whatever they want with that, and we're going to toggle our material here. All right, so then let's start the game and take a look at how this works. All right, so now, well, everything is working quite well. We can start placing our cubes. And then if we toggle, we can see that we now only have our shadows here. All right, so that's pretty much it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any more suggestions for other tutorials, please let me know in the comments. But for today, that's it, and thanks a lot for watching. See you next time.